In this presentation, I'm going to outline the topic of global cultural environment and buying behavior in international business and marketing. The topics outlined in these presentations are definition of culture, elements of culture, cross-cultural comparisons, culture and the marketing mix, organizational cultures, and global customer relationship management or CRM. From a global marketing perspective, the cultural environment matters for two main reasons. First and foremost, cultural forces are a major factor in shaping a company's global marketing mix program. Global marketing managers constantly face the thorny issue of the degree to which cultural differences are a major factor in shaping a company's global marketing mix program. Cultural blunders can easily become a costly affair for multinational companies. Some of the possible liabilities of cultural gaps include embarrassment, lost customer, legal consequences, missed opportunities, huge costs of damage control, and tarnished brand or corporate reputations. Second, cultural analysis often pinpoints market opportunities. Companies that recognize cultural norms that their competitors have so far ignored often gain a competitive edge. For instance, several Japanese diaper makers were able to steal market share away from Procter & Gamble by selling diapers that were much thinner than the ones marketed by Procter & Gamble, thereby better meeting the desires of Japanese mothers, where Japanese homes they have less space than most European and American houses. The first point is definition of cultures. Some anthropologists define culture as the collective programming of the mind which distinguishes the members of one group or category from those of another. Despite the wide variety of definitions, there are common elements that span the different formulations. First of all, people learn culture. In other words, it is not biologically transmitted via the genes. This is nurture and not nature. A society culture is based on or cultivated by various peer groups. It could be family, a school, a youth organization, and so forth, from one generation to the next. And second, culture consists of many different parts that are all interrelated. One element, let's say one social status of a person's culture, does have an impact on another part, say the language that this person uses. So a person's cultural mindset is not a random collection of behaviors. In a sense, culture is a very complex jigsaw puzzle in which all the pieces hang together. Finally, culture is shared by individuals as members of society. These three facets of cultures being learned, shared, and composed of interrelated parts spell out the essence of culture. The next point in the presentations is elements of cultures. Cultures consist of many components that interrelate with one another. In this section will be described elements that are most likely to matter to international marketers, which are material life, language, social interactions, aesthetic, religion, education, and value. We go to the first aspect, which is material life. Material life refers primarily to the technologies that are used to produce, distribute, and consume goods and services within society. Differences in the material environment partly explain differences in the level and type of demand for many consumption goods. For instance, energy consumption is not only much higher in developed countries than in developing nations, but also relies on more advanced forms of such nuclear energy, for example. To bridge the material environment differences, marketers are often forced to adapt their product offering. For example, in the soft drink industry, in many countries outside the US, a store shelf space is heavily restricted and refrigerators have far less capacity, or they have smaller kitchens compared to the kitchens in the US. As a result, soft drink bottlers sell 1 or 1.5 liter bottles rather than 2-liter bottles. Another example is in markets like China and India, the road infrastructure is extremely primitive in some rural areas, making distributions of products a total nightmare. In India, Coca-Cola use large tricycles to distribute cases of Coke along the streets, which are very narrow. The second element of culture is language. Two facets of language have a bearing on marketers. The first is the use of language as a communication tool within cultures, and the second is the huge diversity of language across and often within national boundary. As a communication medium, language has two parts, the spoken and the so-called silent language. The spoken language consists of the vocal sound or written symbols that people use to communicate with one another. Silent language refers to the complex of non-verbal communication mechanism that people use to get a message across. There are 5 distinctive types of silent languages, which are space, material possessions, friendship patterns, time, and agreements. Space refers to the conversation distance between people. They can be close or remote. The second type, material possessions, relates to the role of possessions in people's esteem of one another. Friendship patterns cover the notions and treatment of friends, and perception of time vary also across cultures. Differences exist about the importance of punctuality and the usefulness of small talk and so forth. The final type, agreement, refers to the interpretation of agreements. People in some culture focus on the explicit contract itself, while in other cultures, negotiating parties, they put faith in the spirit of the contract and trust among one another. Not surprisingly, a given gesture often has quite different meanings across cultures. In Japan, for example, scribbling identifying cues on business cards is a major violation of basic business etiquette. On the other hand, foreigners are not expected to engage in the bowing rituals used for greeting peoples of various ranks. Failure to follow this rule will sooner or later lead to hilarious or embarrassing situations. The huge diversity of languages pose another headache to multinational companies. Even within the same language, meanings and expression vary a great deal among countries that share the language. Language blunders easily arise as a result of careless translation of advertising slogans or product labels. Toshiba, for example, once had a commercial jingle in China that went Toshiba, Toshiba. Unfortunately, in Mandarin Chinese, Toshiba sounds a lot like Toshuba, which means let's steal it. Mistranslation like this may convey the image that the company does not care about its customer abroad. Several techniques can be used to achieve good translation of company literature. For example, like the technique of back translation. Also, the use of multilingual labels are fairly common now, especially in the European market. Advertiser can rely on local advertising agency to minimize the spoken part of the commercial, or they can also use subtitles. In markets such as China, marketers also need to decide whether to keep the original brand or company name or whether to adopt a localized brand identity. Many multinationals in China have localized their brand names by creating equivalent names that sound like their global name with a positive meaning in Chinese. For example, Hewlett Packard adopted Huipu as its Chinese brand name. Hui means kindness and Pu means universal. The third element of culture is social interactions. There are three kinds of reference group. The first is membership groups, which is those to which people belong, and anticipatory groups are groupings of which one would like to be a part, and dissociative groups are groups with which individuals do not want to be associated. Reference groups are especially influential for consumer products that are socially visible, such as most status goods and luxury items. Knowledge on reference group patterns could provide input in formulating product positioning strategies and devising advertising campaigns. For example, what Elite Domecq did, which is a Mexican coffee liqueur brand. Elite Domecq sponsored a dance program on MTV Network Asia called Party Zone Mixing with Kalua. The prime motivation behind the sponsorship was that young adults throughout Asia looked to MTV as trendsetter and representative of their lifestyle. The next element of culture is aesthetic. Aesthetic refers to the ideas and perceptions that a culture upholds in terms of beauty and good taste. Culture differs sharply in terms of their aesthetic preferences, though variations are mostly regional and not national. In the Asia-Pacific region, aesthetic expressions are driven by three principles. The first is complexity and decorations. These include multiple forms, shapes, and colors. Second is harmony, and the third is nature display. These include mountains, flowers, and trees, for example. Aesthetic plays a major role in designing the visual of the products, including components such as the packaging and the logo. In Chinese culture, red is perceived as a lucky color. During the Beijing Olympics, many multinational companies marketing in China draped their brands in red, and even Pepsi changed its iconic blue into a red painted can for the occasions. Yellow, on the other hand, is perceived as pleasant and associated with authority. In Japan, pastel tones expressing softness and harmony are preferred to bright colors. Given that colors may invoke different meanings, it is important to realize how the colors of particular package, product, or brand are perceived by consumer. The next element of culture is religion. When religion is an important part of a consumer's life, consumer companies should acknowledge it. In Islamic societies, companies can broaden the appeal of their brands and grow their business by engaging with Muslim consumers. For GlaxoSmithKline gaining halal status, halal means religiously pure, so gaining halal status for its Ribena and Lucozade beverage was an important step to gain clout in Muslim communities. Religious taboos also often force companies to adapt their marketing mix program. When designing a reading toy called Storybook Rhymes aimed toward Turkish children, Fisher-Price ran into difficulties. The toy featured a traditional Turkish poem paired with an illustration of a pig. As the pig was deemed inappropriate for a Muslim country, Fisher-Price then replaced the illustration with pictures of cats. The same thing also when Disney decided to shift the angle of the front entrance gate to Hong Kong Disneyland by 12 degrees after consulting a Chinese Feng Shui master. Other examples of taboo in product design is there's no fourth floor buttons in elevators in China because 4 is bad luck in Chinese. A ballroom measuring exactly 888 square meters, as 8 symbolizes prosperity in Chinese cultures, and burning ritual incense whenever a building was finished. Religion also shapes the holiday calendar in many countries. For example, in many Western European countries, Saint Nicholas Day is the key event for toy companies and candy makers. The holy month of Ramadan for Muslim is also becoming an increasingly commercialized event. In several Muslim countries, Coca-Cola decorated their Coke cans with a crescent moon and star, well-recognized symbol in Islam, to celebrate Ramadan. Also, there were rumors also affected Wrigley sales in Indonesia when an email circulated that claimed the company used pig extract in the manufacturing of its chewing gum product, because in Indonesia, the majority of citizens are Muslim. Also, Hush Puppies, the US-based shoe brand, they lost market share in Malaysia when consumers there discovered that its shoes contained pig skin. The next elements of culture is education. Education is one of the major vehicles for channeling culture from one generation to the next. Two facets of education that matter to international marketers are the level and the quality of education. The level of education varies considerably between countries. Most developed countries have compulsory education up to the late teens. In some countries, however, especially Muslim societies, education is largely the preserve of males. As a consequence, males are often far better educated than females in such societies. One powerful indicator of the education level is a country's illiteracy rate. In countries with low literacy level, marketers need to exercise caution in matters such as product labeling, print advertising, and the tools they are using in the survey research. For example, is one baby food company attributed its poor sales in Africa to the product label that was used. The label's picture of a baby was mistakenly thought by the local people to mean that the jars contain ground-up babies. The next topic is cross-cultural comparisons. Anthropologists make a distinction between high-context and low-context cultures. The interpretation of message in high-context culture rests heavily on contextual cues. Little is made explicit as part of the message. What is left unsaid is often as important as what is said. Examples of contextual cues include the nature of the relationship between the sender and the receiver of the message, for instance in terms of gender, age, and balance of power, the time and the venue of communications. Typical examples of high-context societies are Confucian cultures like China, Korea, and Japan, and also Latin America. Outsiders find high-context cultures often completely mystifying. Low-context cultures, on the other hand, have clear communication modes. What is meant is what is said. The context within which messages are communicated is largely discounted. The US, Scandinavia, and Germany are all examples of low context cultures. In many areas of international marketing, the distinction between high and low context culture does matter. For example, in the field of personal selling, many US companies like to rotate their salespeople across territories. But in high context societies, where nurturing trust and rapport with the client plays a big role, firms in here might need to adjust such rotation policies. In the field of international advertising, campaigns that were developed with a high context cultures in mind are likely to be less effective when used in low context cultures and vice versa. The Dutch scholar Gert Hofstede developed another highly useful cultural classification scheme. The first dimension is labeled power distance. It refers to the degree of inequality among people that is viewed as being acceptable. Societies that are high in power distance tolerate relatively high social inequalities. Status symbols play a vital role. The ideal boss is a benevolent dictator or a good patriarch. Members of these high power distance societies, they accept wide differences in income and power distributions. Examples of high power distant countries are Malaysia, Philippines, Latin America countries like Mexico, Venezuela, Arab as well. On the other hand, low power distant societies tend to be more egalitarian. The rich and powerful in low power distant societies try to look less powerful. Status symbols are frowned upon, and the ideal boss is a resourceful democrat. Low power distance countries include the US, Germany, the British, Scandinavia, and also Israel. The second dimension is labeled uncertainty avoidance. This referring to the extent to which people in a given culture they feel threatened by uncertainty and rely on mechanisms to reduce it. Societies with strong uncertainty avoidance possess a need for rigid rules and formality that structure life. Examples of countries that score high on uncertainty avoidance are Greece, Portugal, Japan, France, and Spain. Consumers in such countries, they value naturalness and freshness. For example, the British cosmetic firm Lush is a prime example of a company that has leveraged this desire. Their stores sell cosmetic au natural with the motto as natural as beauty gets. All products are sold with an expiration date. Lush has been very successful in Japan, a strong uncertainty avoidance country. On the other hand, in weak uncertainty avoidance culture, people tend to be more easygoing, innovative, and entrepreneurial. What is different is intriguing. Some weak uncertainty avoidance countries are India, Malaysia, Great Britain, Hong Kong, and Singapore. The third dimension is called individualism. As the label suggests, this criterion describes the degree to which people prefer to act as individuals rather than as group members. In societies that are high on individualism, the focus is on people's own interests and their immediate families. In such cultures, a child early on realizes that one day it will need to stand on its own feet. There is little need for loyalty to a group. In collectivist societies, on the other hand, the interests of the group take center stage. Members in such societies differentiate between in-group members who are part of its group and all other people. They expect protection from the group and remain loyal to their group throughout their lives. Individualist countries are the US, Australia, and England. Collectivist countries are South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Venezuela. The fourth distinction, masculinity, considers the importance of male values such as assertiveness, status, success, competitive drive within society, and achievement, versus female values like people orientation, solidarity, and quality of life. Masculine societies are those in which value associated with the role of man prevail. Cultures where people favor values such as solidarity, preserving the environment, and quality of life are more feminine. Not surprisingly, Japan is a very masculine society. Other high scorers in masculinity are Austria, Italy, and Mexico. Thailand, Chile, Netherlands, and Sweden are low-scoring countries on the masculinity trait, or they are more feminine. Follow-up research on Hofstede work in Asia led to a fifth dimension, long-termism. This criterion refers to the distinction between societies with a pragmatic long-term orientation and those with a short-term focus. People in long-term oriented societies tend to have values that center around the futures, including perseverance and thrift. On the other hand, members of short-term oriented cultures are concerned about values that reflect the past and the present. For example, respect for tradition. China, Hong Kong, Japan, and South Korea score high on the long-term dimension. However, the United States, England, Canada, and the Philippines score low in this criterion. Several researchers have looked at the influence of culture on consumption patterns. Luxury articles are often used as a badge of one's success. They are more appealing to members of masculine cultures than to people in feminine cultures. Indeed, one study found that the masculinity of a culture correlate positively with the ownership of expensive watch, multiple watches, sales of jewelry, and the ownership of a suit or dress priced over $700. The next topic is culture and the marketing mix. Culture is a key pillar of the marketplace. The success of international marketing activities is to a large extent driven by the local culture. These cultural variables may act as barrier or opportunities. In this section, we will discuss how culture and the firm's marketing mix interact. The first, I will outline how culture affect the product policy of the marketers. For example, is the Powerpuff Girl, which is a karate superhero show aired on the Cartoon Network with a huge following among American preteens. When the show debuted in Japan with a Japanese look, it failed miserably. To boost its appeal, Cartoon Network decided to revamp the characters. Toei, a well-established Japanese animation house, was brought in to assist with the overhaul. The characters Blossom, Buttercup, and Bubbles were given Japanese names, were given more realistic outfits like miniskirts and hip-hugging belts, and also given the lives of Japanese junior high school students. As Japanese kids prefer more narrative plots, the shows were made 15 to 20 minutes long compared to the 7 to 11-minute shows in the US. They also introduced new themes in line with Japanese girls' expectations, such as love themes and acceptance of people who are different. For example, a monster can be anyone who is different from us. If we change our attitude, they can become our friends. The show then became successful, not just among Japanese girls, but also attracted animation-obsessed adult men. As a result, Cartoon Network launched special items tied to shows such as bookmarks and pop music targeting the show's adult Japanese fans. International donut chains such as Dunkin' Donuts and Krispy Kreme have modified their product offerings in Asian region to cater toward Asian palates. Dunkin' Donuts Taiwan, for instance, offers localized flavors such as green tea and honeydew melon. Donut chains also lower the sugar content as Asians have a lower preference for sweet foods. Kit Kat, on the other hand, gained a strong following among Japanese students, especially during exam periods. The name of the chocolate bar, made by Nestle, closely resembles a Japanese expression, kitokatsu, used by students to wish each other good luck prior to exams. The phrase roughly translates as, "I hope you will win." Often, Japanese parents will buy Kit Kat as a lucky charms for their children during exam days. Cultural norms sometimes open up new product opportunities. In most Asian countries, fair or white skin is associated with positive values that relate to beauty, class, and an upscale lifestyle. Dark skin, on the other hand, is linked with hard labor and toil. In India, the skin whitener market, as well as in Indonesia, has been growing at an annual rate of around 20%. Multinational companies such as Unilever, Avon, and Beiersdorf have been able to cash in on this phenomenon by marketing skin whiteners. Indeed, for Avon, its top-selling product in India is its Fairness Cream. In Vietnam, Unilever customized its brand to reflect local customs. The Vietnamese version of Sunsilk shampoo includes extract from a seed known as bouquet, which Vietnamese women have long used to keep their hair shiny black. Bahasan berikutnya adalah bagaimana budaya mempengaruhi kebijakan harga. Contoh yang pertama adalah di negara-negara barat, harga yang tinggi sering dipergunakan sebagai sinyal atas kualitas yang premium untuk banyak kategori produk. Asumsi tersebut juga terjadi di negara berkembang. Contohnya, perusahaan multinasional farmasi yaitu Pfizer memperoleh manfaat dari asumsi di negara berkembang bahwa obat-obat paten layak dibayar jauh lebih mahal karena persepsi bahwa obat-obat generik kurang aman dan kurang efektif. Contoh yang kedua, di budaya Cina seperti Hong Kong, price point atau poin harga yang sering digunakan berakhir dengan angka 8, bukan dengan angka 9. Seperti contohnya, jika di negara barat harga yang ditetapkan adalah 7.999, di Cina umumnya mempergunakan price point yang berakhiran 8, yaitu 7.888. Karena dalam budaya Cina, angka 8 diasosiasikan dengan keberuntungan dan juga kemakmuran. Cultural variables may also dictate distribution strategies. Retailers must often fine-tune their practice when entering foreign markets. Walmart learned this lesson the hard way in Germany, a market that the mega retailer was never able to crack. Grocery bagging turned out to be a no-no for German shoppers as they do not like strangers handling their groceries. In China, where face-to-face contact is important when selling computers, Dell overhauled its direct sales model when it announced to sell computers through GOM, a major Chinese electronics retailers. McDonald's also offers another example. In many developing world cities, McDonald's now offers delivery service. The model works well in traffic congested cities with cheap labor. Culture will typically have a major influence on a firm's communication strategy. Key events of a country cultural calendar, for example Chinese New Year in China and Ramadan in Muslim country, often create major marketing opportunities. One recent study found that North Americans are persuaded more by promotion-focused information, means benefits to be gained, whereas Chinese consumers are driven by prevention-focused message or problems that can be avoided. Advertising styles that are effective in certain cultures can be counterproductive in other cultures. In high context cultures, in Spain, for example, Italy and Japan, communication styles tend to be more indirect and subtle, making use of less text and more symbols. On the other hand, in low context cultures like Germany and Scandinavian countries, advertising use more text, factual data, and reasoning. Advertising in countries such as the US and the UK often use a lecture format style in which a celebrity lectures the audience about the good points of the product being advertised. One study compared the reaction of Chinese and US subjects to different advertising appeals. Not surprisingly, the study found that Chinese consumers favored a collectivistic appeal, whereas their US counterparts preferred an individualistic appeal. The next point in this presentation is organizational cultures. Organizational culture is shared assumptions, values, and beliefs which governs how people behave in organizations. These shared values have a strong influence on the people in the organization and dictate how they dress, how they act, and perform their jobs. Every organization develops and maintains a unique culture which provides guidelines and boundaries for the behavior of the members of the organization. As you can see in the figure, organizational culture types can be described along two dimensions. The vertical axis distinguishes between organizations with organic, with emphasis on flexibility, spontaneity, and individuality, and mechanistic process, which emphasize on control, stability, and order. The horizontal axis describes whether the organizational emphasis is on internal maintenance, which are integration, efficient and smooth operations, or external positioning, including competitive actions and achievement and differentiation. This scheme leads to four organizational culture types labeled clan, adhocracy, hierarchical, and market. In the figure, you can also see for each of these organizational forms the dominant attributes, leadership styles, primary means of bonding, and strategic emphasis. Clan cultures in the top left of the quadrant stress cohesiveness, participation, and teamwork. They are often headed by a patriarch. The bonding glue is loyalty and traditions. Commitment to such firms runs high. In contrast, adhocracy cultures in the top right of the quadrant are driven by values like entrepreneurship, creativity, adaptability, flexibility, and tolerance. Effectiveness in such cultures is viewed in terms of finding new markets and new opportunities for growth. The head of such organization is usually an entrepreneur or an innovator. Such firms are committed to innovation and new product development. The third form is the hierarchy culture in the bottom left of the quadrant, which emphasize orders, rules, and regulations. Such organizations tend to be very formalized and structured. Maintaining a smooth running operation is very important for such firms. Organizational effectiveness within hierarchical cultures is defined by consistency and achievement of clearly stated goals. Finally, market culture-like organizations in the bottom right of the quadrant value competitiveness, task and goal achievement, and productivity. These organizations tend to be production-oriented. The major concern is getting the job done. Most multinational firms have elements of several types of cultures. Despite the fact that managers these days are exposed to similar business concepts and technologies, cultural differences in management style and practice still persist. The example is the American subsidiary of Hyundai, a Korean car maker, experienced a major management shake-up in recent years. One important reason behind the exodus of talent was that many of the former US executives deeply disliked Hyundai's authoritarian management style with little tolerance for disagreement. Another example is Daimler Chrysler was formed by the merger of Daimler and Chrysler. They went through a, let's say, stormy honeymoon period, not the least of which were the cross-cultural clash stemming from the merger. The old Daimler was bureaucratic and very formal, whereas the old Chrysler was spontaneous. The company's German managers moved toward a less formal way of doing business under the influence of their US counterparts. Eventually, Daimler sold Chrysler to Cerberus Capital Management, a private investment firm. The next point in this presentation is Global Customer Relationship Management, or CRM. CRM, or database marketing, is the strategic process of managing interactions between the company and its customer, with the objective of maximizing the lifetime value of the customers for the company and satisfying the customers by being customer-focused. Just as in other areas of global marketing, country units can share ideas and expertise on CRM programs. Typically, customer relationship evolve through distinct phases, each with its unique requirements. The first phase is customer acquisition. This phase involves prospect evaluation, acquisition management, and recovery of old customers. This includes brand switchers and inactive customers. The second phase focused on retention. The most critical areas here include customer evaluation, consumer complaint management, retention mechanism through loyalty programs, for example, upselling. It means the firm tries to sell higher margin items to its current client, or cross-selling, meaning the firm tries to sell other products in its portfolio to the existing client, and referral management. Many reasons can motivate the rollout of CRM programs. Many cited reasons for CRM are: the first, decreasing customer loyalty, which puts pressures on the company to improve programs for customer retention and recovery. The second reasons that motivate CRM program is deteriorating customer response rate in customer acquisition, leading to higher acquisition cost. CRM can help here by offering better qualified customer addresses and guidelines on effective acquisition strategies. The third reason is more demanding customers. The next reason is highly differentiated target segments, which require differentiated marketing campaigns and, in the extreme case, one-on-one marketing. The other reasons is emergence of the internet, which allows richer communications and interactive marketing. Some gains from CRM program are better understanding of customer expectations and behavior. This knowledge then allows the multinational company to develop differentiated strategies. The ultimate goal of CRM is to be able to offer the right product or service to the right customers at the right price and via the proper distribution channel. CRM also provide customer database that facilitates direct contact or direct mail campaign. Under such circumstances, CRM offers a valuable alternative to reach the target customer more effectively and efficiently.